GoldenEye 007 for Nintendo 64 is kind of an interesting game for how its legacy seems to have flip-flopped over the years. When it first came out, it was kind of this era-defining title, the first real first-person shooter on console that hit it big, that people enjoyed. The multiplayer was very fondly remembered. It's the multiplayer itself. The comment on that is very fun. Now and then, I think that's my stance on the whole thing. This game, it's important for its innovations, but the things that it's kind of left behind are the ways that it differs from its successors. Because GoldenEye 007 is a very goofy game. It is, there's a bunch of different cheats. There's all these little in-jokes. The gameplay itself is it's very rudimentary, which kind of makes it so that anybody can give it a try. Aiming, you can kind of do it, but it's very inconsistent. It takes a lot of effort to do that kind of stuff. The technology they use to render the characters, it's very goofy with the way they plaster face textures on. And something about this game that I've just come to appreciate is just that kind of rawness to it. It has these features that other shooters have, four-player multiplayer, but there's very little that gets in the way of not only just getting into a match and playing, but also people understanding the way the game is played. Because the weapons are so simple, it's just guns or hitting things, analog stick movement, aiming is barely possible, let alone a good strategy to do. So it's like you can play this game with I don't know, I played this game with my little sister when we were in elementary school, and she doesn't really play games, but we could still understand how to try it out. And it was still fun because the kind of the jaggedness of it puts everyone on the same level. People that are experienced with shooter games are going to be put down a peg because it doesn't really work the same way other ones do. And the people who are new to shooters, they don't know what to expect, and they're going to kind of approach it in kind of a blunt way. It's similar to the way that inexperienced people play fighting games, where they just press random buttons and try out different things because you never know what the right solution could be. And I think that's just very fun. This game, it's one of my favorite party games, I've realized. And it also is evocative of kind of the rareware charm of N64. It's interesting that that they kind of were forward thinking in a lot of ways in terms of the way game design would be going forward, but in this kind of raw form, it doesn't really have the same I guess appeal of later titles. There's a certain amount of automation to rareware games and a certain amount of I guess adventure game sensibility where they don't always have the smoothest controls. They don't always have core gameplay systems that are so engrossing that you have to play it. A lot of the appeal is based on kind of the more graphical design aspects of things, the charm of the worlds, kind of the fun of exploration, the kind of, collectathons, the simple satisfaction of collecting items. And GoldenEye kind of appeals in a similar way, where its gameplay isn't exactly perfect, but it's a very charming title. It feels very raw. It's fun to play multiplayer, It's has a very hard to describe appeal. And I guess to get back to my point, I think that the way people have viewed this game kind of reflects the way that game criticism has shifted. Because if you look at GoldenEye and a lot of Rareware games objectively, they kind of fall apart. Their focus on feel over function, especially during the Nintendo 64 era, has kind of left a few of them feeling hollow. Think about how Conker's Bad Fur Day was this extremely well-regarded, beloved title because it had this really appealing idea, a kid's platformer style game that's very vulgar and crass. But the gameplay, it gets the job done. It's a little bit jank. It's kind of just the vessel for this fun idea. And, a lot of people kind of turned against the game, especially in the later 2010s. Back in the early 2010s, when the kids who played GoldenEye and N64 Rareware games were coming of age, they touted them as the best games ever. Because, the way they focused on feel kind of gave these people unique experiences that they would remember forever. Their graphical style, the flair was able to sustain their legacy. And then once those kind of people, there's a bit of a backlash. People have called GoldenEye this horrible game that's aged poorly. And it has. I mean, sure, But I think nowadays people are more accommodating for games being worth something, even if the gameplay isn't perfect. Because there's personality here, there's effort, there's kind of like bravado, and especially compared to later shooters that have become more sterile, less willing to take chances on silly ideas, less willing to put cheat codes, you have to log into random accounts to play with other people, all this stuff. It's less accessible, less immediate. The punchy, the punchiness of this game has become more appealing. And I think with the re-release, people have rediscovered what's so great and what's so clearly wrong about this game. But the errors are also fun, the unbalanced characters, the terrible weapons, the way everything explodes. It's all become iconic in its own way, and GoldenEye has carved out its own legacy. And as someone who used to kind of be a GoldenEye hater, I think I want to salute just what a just what an interesting, unique title